Joining me now on the latest edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. It ends up being a bit of an exit survey because while the Knicks are headed to the second round of the NBA playoffs for an unbelievable serendipitous matchup against the Miami Heat, he is headed to the offseason with a ton of questions that I'm hopefully allowed to ask and he's going to answer. The predictor of Cavs in 6, whose co-host predicted Cavs in 5.
Hey, you got the games right.
Good job, Carter. You nailed it. The series would go 5 games. He's also co-host of the outstanding Cavaliers podcast for the Cleveland Cavaliers podcast network. Also on their YouTube channel, The Chase Down. He is Justin Rowan, and he returns to Knicks Film School. Justin, how you been? How'd the last week and a half go for you?
I'm doing great. Just as I predicted, the Cleveland Cavaliers and Milwaukee Bucks are going toe to toe after the first round, looking each other eye to eye, and we'll see how that shakes out. I'm doing good, man. It sucks. Obviously, it sucks. I thought this was a series that could go a lot longer, and a lot of kind of the areas of concerns that we highlighted in our crossover podcast, but before the series, it all came to fruition, and the Knicks absolutely earned this. And I got to be honest, I mentioned this on last night's podcast, kind of summarizing my thoughts, but I'm rooting for the Knicks at this point, right? Like I want them to have a great showing in the second round. I want to see them advance to the Eastern Conference Finals. I want it, like you never want to be beat by a team that goes out sad the next round, and then you're like, okay, well, what does that mean by like osmosis here about the Cavs, right? Like I think the Knicks put up a great fight. I'm hoping that Julius Randle obviously is okay. I'm sure that's once again you're doing that kind of content in a series preview, so that's fun. But look, man, this is a really good deep team that just beat the hell out of the Cavs in every facet of the game.
So I've split this rundown into like 2 parts, where the first part of it is like, how do you feel about this? And specifically like X's and O's, and we'll get your take on it. Then I have some fan base questions and how they're taking the loss today and the Cavalier faithful at large. So I want to start with how you feel about this, because we went back and forth and we did our crossovers before the series. And I don't want to say because we did highlight the rebounding thing would be a thing, that the Knicks are a great offensive rebounding team and the Cavs were last in defensive rebounding since the All-Star break. I didn't realize it was going to be the decider of the series in my mind, but I'm curious for you, is that the biggest thing that surprised you, that became the biggest decisive thing of the series, or was there other things about the Knicks that surprised you?
I don't know if that's necessarily surprising. Like, we talked about depth and we talked about offensive rebounding being big time X factors, right? And I think traditionally when you look at a playoff series, those aren't normally something that decides a series, right? Like it was, okay, well, I know that this is a big area of concern, but is this going to be what ultimately dooms the team? And I think what we found is when you take it to this level of extreme, where you have, the best offensive rebounding team and the worst defensive rebounding team, when you have what has a great case to be the deepest team in the league and one of the most shallow playoff rotations, right? Like, I think taking both of those things to an extreme definitely played a massive factor. But what did we talk about before the series is no matter how you rank guys in the regular season, no matter what all their numbers look like, in a 10-day span, anybody can outplay anybody. We highlighted, Kyrie outplaying Steph in the finals, right? And it was, okay, we can do as many pre-series rankings as we want, but what ultimately happens in the series is what's going to dictate it. And the Knicks had the best guard, and the Knicks had the best big man in this series. And for a Cavs team whose strengths are guards and big men, when that is the case, you're not going to win the series. So as much as we focus on the rebounding, I do think you have to look at every single one of the core 4, because I think all of them had games that were stronger. Like Jared Allen started the series 14-14. Second game, got the rebounds, 3 steals, 3 blocks, 3 assists, right? Like he was doing his part. But I think he got worn down as the series went on. And some of that I think we can highlight schematically. Donovan Mitchell started off slow game one, eventually exploded to 38 points and wasn't really a factor for the rest of the series. Darius Garland was relatively consistent in terms of offense outside that one game, but the playmaking wasn't there, right? Evan Mobley's offense was not there at all, right? So I think every single one of these guys can point at something that they did individually that needed to be better. And I think that was the main story coming out of the series.
It's so interesting you talk about Mobley like having to be better specifically in that case, because that was the first thing that I took away from the first crossover we did when I came on the day after Randall's ankle was diagnosed before the last regular season game. And the thought was like, if you and Carter thought that Mobley had taken a leap offensively, then like you should really like your chances. And I got to be honest, my biggest takeaway from watching the Cavs for these 5 games is how not there yet Mobley is offensively. And like Julius Randle on one leg, he barely moved him. The fadeaways that he was doing in the short mid range, there was a very clear, like just flat out, we kept calling it weight room every time we'd see him try to back down someone in the paint. It was like, oh, so this is a not yet type of series for him. Is that how
rushing too, right? Like there was
his process just wasn't there yet, So
times in the short roll where usually he kind of has that little bit of a floater or push on in the lane, and there were times where I don't know if he was trying to figure out, am I throwing the lob or am I attempting the shot? Like it wouldn't even hit rim; it would hit the backboard. One of the stats I highlighted was for the series, Mobley played about 38 minutes per game. He averaged 9.8 points per game. Isaac Okoro only played 15 minutes per game, and he averaged 6.4 points per game.
Yeah.
Like the whole conceit, the whole thing that we had talked about all season long with the Cavs is when you get to postseason basketball, what defenses can do to a backcourt of 2 guards that are like 6'3" and below is all like you're going to make life hell for guys that short if they don't have a front court initiator. The backcourts where that's worked, you've had a guy like a Draymond Green that helps free them up, or even Bam Adebayo. Look at what he does to help open things up for the Miami Heat. Evan Mobley needed to be that guy. That is kind of the whole philosophy of this roster building, and he wasn't there yet. And as much as you can put that on him, I do think Donovan Mitchell left a lot of food on the table. Darius Garland left a lot of food on the table. They could have been better as well, but in terms of Evan Mobley, the 19 point per game score that we saw from like mid-January on for the rest of the year just simply wasn't there.
Well, so that's Mobley. And while like the defense, I think, was the most impressive thing that I took away from him.
He was good on that end.
He was very good. And that's why like the Julius Randle performance is so difficult to grade, because I thought he finally figured out some good offense and good process in game 5. And of course he gets hurt again. But for one game, he had a good half. And then I thought Mobley made it even more difficult for him. Yeah. Game 2, I mean, most of his made baskets were in garbage time, and then he re-aggravates. The theory is that he got injured again on that flagrant by Jared Allen, which I don't care about whether people thought it was dirty or not. I cared more about why he's in the game in the first place. Like, why does Tibbs have him in? Point being, like, you saw Julius really become a jump shooter the rest of the series. So you wondered if he was
that was a factor.
It just was more of, he wasn't able to do bully ball anymore. You had Jetty and you had Rubio on him a few times, and he still wasn't going to the paint.
Green.
Right. So it's like, you're not able to take advantage of that. So maybe you're just not able to push anymore. But I say all that because the Mobley defensive side of the ball, I saw it, but offensively, it was clear, like, okay, second year. Like, I have to remember that while they made the big trade, he's still in his second year. We got to talk about Donovan Mitchell, of course. And it became the Donovan Mitchell series because of what happened last summer. And a lot of Knicks fans, I think myself included, have now been like, okay, we can now put that storyline to rest. Like, it's a good thing, at least for now, that they didn't make that trade. Mm-hmm. So I now ask on the inverse, how are you feeling the day after the team that didn't trade for Donovan Mitchell defeated Donovan Mitchell in a playoff series?
Honestly, it doesn't really change my feelings of this. People say, well, you did all this to lose in 5 games in the first round. And my question is still, where would they be if they didn't do this, right? Like, would they have been in the play-in? Would they just be, okay, well, we lost to the Milwaukee Bucks or the Boston Celtics in the first round as a 7 seed. And we can keep kind of going along in our process, right? Like, you learn from these setbacks. You learn from being exposed in this way. And the Knicks were like, their strengths were in all the Cavs' pain points, whether it was offensive rebounding, the physicality, right? Like, that's what hurts as a Cavs fan is team identity. What we did, we used to go out there and we would out-rebound the hell out of teams. Tristan Thompson made the Atlanta Hawks life hell. We played the Golden State Warriors and all that ball movement. We're jamming every single cutter. We're making Curry feel our presence on the defensive end of the floor so he doesn't want to run around. And the Knicks did that to the Cavs. The Cavs don't have the shooting to generate consistent spacing, so they do it through their movement. They do it through 3-man actions. The split cuts, everything that they do with their big men. And what happened was the Knicks, and to be clear, because I know everyone gets sensitive after a series, it was perfectly legal, but they were,
they're playing physical with them. Yeah.
They're making the presence felt. You're jamming every single cutter. You're making sure that nobody's getting a free run through the lane. That's great basketball. I love that basketball. That was the type of basketball I played when I was playing, right? Like, that is exactly what you need to be doing. And the Cavs' response to that was, I don't like getting hit, so I'm going to stand around. And the offense got stagnant as a result of that, right? So, like, full credit to the Knicks for doing that. But I do think in terms of how the Cavs respond to this, a lot got exposed here. And some of it is going to be front office level, right? Finding ways to improve the rotation, to add depth, to add kind of what's been missing here. Some of it's going to be internal with the players, right? Like, you're going to have to get in the weight room. You're going to have to be ready for this level of physicality. I think other matchups, they probably would have shown a lot better than they did in this one. But, these weaknesses got exposed. What are you going to do about it? I'm not trying to sound like Michael Irvin, but really, what are you going to do about it? And then coaching staff obviously is going to have to reflect on this as well, right? And I think there were limited levers that they had to pull. Like, there just isn't the depth. I think that's fair, but there was also mistakes and things that could have gone better there, right? Like, it's a team-wide failure, and honestly, there's some comfort in it not being Donovan Mitchell averages 40 points per game, looks around the locker room and says, y'all lost. It wasn't that. You could probably make an argument he wasn't even the best guard on the Cavs in this series. Like, I think Garland was probably a little more consistent overall. That can't be the case. And you listen to the quotes today. He owned up to it. I expect them to respond to this. And honestly, if this isn't something that they do respond to, these aren't the type of guys that you can build around, right? And I have full confidence that they are going to respond to this.
So his performance in this series isn't, I'm sure it's disappointing. Okay. You've kind of answered this, but how's the fan base feeling about him?
Not great. Not great, man.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, I'm not sitting here telling people, be calm, be chill. Like, think of the long-term approach, right? Like, I got to do nuance because I'm jumping on a podcast. And if I'm just sitting here whining and complaining, that's not going to be interesting podcasting for the fans. Like, and this is the exact same thing with Knicks fans. If they cared so much when they win, where they're celebrating and they're loving it and they're doing the fan experience properly, you can't have that passion on one end without having the passion on the other end. When the team is disappointing, you're going to feel that. You're going to be angry. You're going to want heads to roll. You're going to want to blame everybody but your favorite player, right? Like, you're going to find who you want to scapegoat and go out and try to get your pound of flesh, and you're going to yell. This is the time for yelling. This is the time for them to be disappointed. And I'm not here gatekeeping anybody's response. I'm going to take a measured approach because it's what I do. It's also just like, that's the way I am as a fan, even to begin with, right? Like, even when we went back and started the podcast, what I do is try to find what's happening. And I probably skew to the realistic side of what's possible, right? Like, I'm solutions oriented. That's just the way I view life. So that's the way I'm approaching this. But for right now, people aren't feeling good, man. Like, it's not great.
Yeah. What's up, Knicks fans? GMAC here, interrupting this episode with a very important programming note. As you know, the New York Knicks take on the Miami Heat in the second round of the NBA playoffs. Game 1 is hosted by the Knicks at Madison Square Garden. I can't believe it either. Well, if you can't afford to go to the game or just don't want to go to the game, but you still want to watch the game with a bunch of raucous Knicks fans like yourself. You know where you got to go? It's the second ever KFS playoff watch party, baby. We're going to Penn 6, 132 West 31st Street in Midtown. It's walking distance from Madison Square Garden. The frequently asked questions we get, it's free of charge. Bring your kids, bring your friends. You could bring as many friends as you want to. Let's pack that place out with Knicks fans. There's even drink specials on the menu this time. $5 on select drafts, $6 on house wine, $8 on house drinks. You want to be there and watch it with the KFS crew. Game 1, Knicks against the Heat. It's going down. Again, that's 132 West 31st Street. Be there at 12:30 when the New York Knicks take on the Miami Heat. I tried to put myself in the reality of if the Knicks had made the trade and this same scenario happened. You know, like it's different because of like if it was like in the final running, the Knicks and Cavs were the two teams rumored and the Knicks pulled the trigger. And then the Cavs beat the Knicks in 5 games, what New York would be doing with Donovan Mitchell right now. And after seeing what they did with like Alfred Payton 2 years ago and Julius last year, and to be honest, RJ Barrett this year, and we'll talk about RJ in a second because I want to give the Canadian a chance to talk about his boy. But I couldn't imagine like going through the wiping of the assets to the, not to the extent the Cavs did, but what the Knicks were rumored to have had to do to then have him have this type of performance. I guess the only, because I watched his post-game presser last night and I could tell that this was a guy that was, I kind of got to be honest, I don't know if you felt the same way. I kind of felt it after game 4 that he realized like this was like this series is not going our way. And I don't think he quit in game 5, but there was just a hint of like the only way we're going to win this. And I think it showed in the shot diet is if I go nuts, and it just didn't happen. Yeah. Do you think he felt the pressure of, I don't want to talk. I really think he doesn't think it's about the trade or last summer, but like specifically it being a New York series and his ties to New York and the Johnny Bryan of it all. Do you think he felt that kind of pressure and that's what led to his performance?
Yeah, I never want to play like armchair psychiatrist. Like, who knows? Like maybe even just going up against Jalen Brunson again, right? With the way last year went, right? Like there's so many factors. And there were times early in the series too, where it's like, okay, I think, and again, this goes into kind of an encouraging aspect of this. It wasn't from the start, okay, these guys aren't ready. I'm just going to take every single shot where I'm giving up on the team concept, right? Like he was trying to find his balance of when to defer, when not to, right? Like, okay, we're a little bit better when the offense is running through Garland's hands. Let's kind of explore that space. And then what ended up happening was he was just missing a lot of open shots and he would press and the offense would break down. And, you know, basketball's a cyclical thing, right? Like that. So, I don't want to necessarily kind of attribute it to that. But I mean, I'll say it again. I'm pretty sure I said on your podcast and in talking to you early in the season and before the series, like I thought New York made the right decision. I thought Donovan Mitchell is kind of that finishing piece that you bring in, and it would feel a little bit different if the Knicks did it and the supporting guys around him is 28-year-old Julius Randle and 26-year-old Jalen Brunson and 25-year-old Mitchell Robinson, right? Like, instead, it's, 21-year-old Evan Mobley, 23-year-old Darius Garland, 24-year-old Jared Allen, right? Like it's a bit of a different dynamic. And it's when you see these consolidation trades, and honestly, I think the Knicks are going to do it. Like this was another one of the things that I brought up on the podcast is the Cavs are going to have to learn some lessons from this because the Knicks aren't going anywhere. Like Milwaukee's got questions with Middleton. Harden might go to Philly with rumors, right? Like East might be opening up a little bit at the top. Knicks aren't going anywhere and they still have this stockpile of assets. So whether it's Joel Embiid, whether it's whoever they choose to go after, they're probably going to be bringing in another piece at some point in the near future. And the Knicks are going to have to go through a little bit of what the Cavs did, where you sacrifice your depth. And usually it's year 2, another transaction window after you make that consolidation trade where you start to round out the rotation and you feel a little bit better about your depth, right? So the Cavs are going to have to make some of those moves on the margins, but more than anything, the growth needs to come from the core 4. Like that is the absolute most important thing when it comes to the Cavs.
So let me follow up on that because there's a fascinating trend with these playoffs where you look at Minnesota, you look at Atlanta, and unfortunately, you look at Cleveland. And these teams that went all in with that type of trade, they're gone in the first round. And the ones that did go all in that are still left are Phoenix, Kevin Durant, and we'll see like where that goes.
I was about to say Phoenix went all in too.
Right. I'm listing. I'm about to list the three. The ones that did go all in are Phoenix, the Lakers with Anthony Davis. But even the Anthony Davis trade, like they won their title and then they went all in again with Russ and it failed. Yeah. But then they, with this deadline, went back to building out depth, and now the Lakers are in a much better spot. The other one that you can point to is Milwaukee and the Jrue Holiday trade. But again, you had Giannis, so it was really like the final piece.
And you got a championship out of it,
right? So I'm trying not to make a full judgment on those types of all-in trades. I'm just wondering if, as a lesson for the Knicks going forward, and like who knows what the Cavs do if they're able to get a wing in the future, or if, like you said, the core four take a leap and the younger players get better, as they're most likely going to do. But like you look at Boston, who never made the consolidation trade, or like the very famous like Kevin Love for Klay Thompson trade that never happened, right? Like those types of consolidation trades. Like, I don't know. Do you think there's something the Knicks could learn in the sense of like, I don't want to overreact to what they're doing. Real quick, I don't want to overreact to the Knicks winning one playoff series and then beating an 8th seed to get to the conference finals and being like, we're good. Like, we don't need to do any consolidation trade. This is the roster. Let's be Memphis.
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't matter either way, you know?
There is a very, very important lesson, which is one, make sure you're going all in on the right guy. You have to feel confident. And right now, I still feel good that Donovan Mitchell's that kind of guy. Like, I think he is a good fit with this. And they're going to need to make some adjustments on the rotation. I think, obviously, Evan Mobley's going to need to pan out. But if that happens, I believe in this foundation and what this core can be. But you have to make sure you're going in on the right guy. That's lesson one. Lesson two is there a team building route that's guaranteed to win? Like, Toronto Raptors, they went organic for a while. Eventually, they made their consolidation trade and got Kawhi, right? Like, but Boston, a team that hasn't made the consolidation trade, and they still last year they almost lost to Milwaukee without Middleton. They almost lost to Miami with Jimmy Butler missed shot, and then they lost to a Warriors team they shouldn't have lost to. Yeah, like Andrew Wiggins was the second best player on that team, and Boston struggled because they didn't have a single player that could dribble, right? Like, they lost to a Warriors team that they shouldn't have lost to, right? Like, there is no roster building path that is the genius path, like the Sam Hinkie process. Like, every single one of this, you're going to need luck. You're going to need the right breaks. You're going to need the right matchups. I think what we're seeing in the NBA right now is in a season with like unparalleled parity. Of course, it's going to become about the matchups. Of course, you're going to start seeing upsets, right? Like, the league is getting flatter than ever, and there's talent everywhere. So these things that really matter, like, we're probably going to see more variance moving forward. So from a Knicks standpoint, it's okay. We feel really, really good about the talent we've developed. We've shown that we're a team that can draft and develop. We can find diamonds in the rough. We can get the best out of all these guys. We have a leader that we feel great about in Jalen Brunson. We need someone that fits that culture, and we're not going to sacrifice what we are as a team to bring in just a star because it's a name, right? Like, it needs to be someone that fits, that makes sense, that isn't the first name that hits the market, right? Like, I wouldn't be going all in on like Damian Lillard if he hit the market. Like, if you're gutting your depth for Damian Lillard, like, as great as he is, I don't see that as a fit, right? So it's all going to be about who you're going for, how much you're giving up, and your level of confidence that you are still going to be able to maintain a functional team around them.
So I will say one thing that I found really interesting from listening to the chase down over throughout the series was when you guys would refer back to like, oh, when we were playing the Warriors in the finals and like postseason series that you were relating this to. Just how we can't do that. Like, we have the Hawks series from 2 years ago, and it's like, oh, it quite literally went the exact same way in the fact that one team was there for the first time and over a 5-game series. 5 games, yeah. It was
like we were
the same games too.
Night.
Yeah.
We were referring to it last night, right? Like, some of that muscle memory you gain is even like what RJ went through, which first 2 games played like crap. wasn't a factor. I went on a Knicks podcast after 2 games and they were saying, hey, like maybe RJ is going to drop out of the rotation. And then for the rest of it, he's probably better than Donovan Mitchell, right? And again, like that's one of those things where just because you have playoff experience doesn't mean you're going to consistently perform, doesn't mean you're going to play well, but you get some of that muscle memory to bounce back, right? Like Kyrie played like crap in games 1 and 2 of 2016 and 1 and 2 of 2017, right? But he played great the rest of those series. That's what we saw out of RJ. He played like crap for the first 2 games and he bounced back. He learned from that experience. And even after a rough up and down regular season, he showed some toughness and resilience here, right? Like, and Jalen Brunson has that. Josh Hart is a vet in the league. And I think that was a guy you could have easily identified before the series as he's a playoff performer, even though he hasn't been there.
Yeah, the Josh Hart of it all. And then I promise I want to talk more about RJ, but the Josh Hart thing, I feel like we didn't really talk about him before the series. And like he came up and I brought up how good they've been since the Josh Hart trade and how much of a factor he's been. I didn't realize he was going to become like Tibbs's go-to 48-minute guy.
I had a feeling you were too busy talking about Emmanuel Quickly as the next Michael Jordan.
So hand up, that's on me. I did say that Quickly goes through these shooting slumps and that can happen. I didn't expect him to make like 7 field goals in the series. Like that. I was sitting here saying, hey,
Karis LeVert's a little better than you think. Like he's probably outplayed RJ for the season. Mm-hmm. And I mean, Karis outside of game 1, he was probably the most like reliable, steady, consistent Cav throughout the series.
So it's funny that like we did get a lot right in our pre-series predictions and our coverage. And where we previewed out the series and how it might go and how the Knicks would win. I got to say, like the 2 biggest things I personally got wrong and really what we got wrong throughout the Knicks Film School preview of this series. First of all, that they can't win a series without Julius Randle. They largely did.
Yeah.
And this RJ thing was just, I mean, the revelation he was from games 3, 4, and 5. He saved his season. The conversation is no longer because you want to talk about consolidation trades. He's been the guy that's going out.
Keep cooking.
John called him matching salary at one point in between games. Oh, now for those listening on the pod, Justin just grabbed a Knicks foam finger and number 1 foam finger and put it on.
Let's go, RJ.
Hand. Now we're starting.
For the rest of the playoffs, let's go, RJ.
But now he's become a Knicks fan to root for his countrymen. John, to antagonize the RJ Hive, called him matching salary. And look, like nationally, Zach Lowe was like, when am I going to see a good RJ Barrett game? Stephen A, for whatever he says matters, was like, I'm okay if he sits and gets out of the rotation. We thought his minutes would get cut under 20 as Quickly has a good series, as Grimes has a good series. And then come game 3, I thought everybody on the court was kind of stiff in those first 6-7 minutes. And the only guy making shots was RJ. And then we get 3 straight games where he's not just playing like good basketball, not just playing the best basketball we've seen him play in this series. It's the best 3 games of his career. And so I guess on the opposite side of that, when you went into this series thinking like, okay, we don't really have to worry about RJ, and games 1 and 2 really showed that out. Like, what was your perspective of seeing him suddenly become such an X factor and a difference maker over the final 3 games?
Yeah, I mean, great for him, honestly. Like, this is so much of when we're talking about basketball. Like, I always compare it to, I think some people think it's like algebra where, okay, here's player performances, now solve for X of what they are. When in reality, right, like it's human beings going out there that can play better or they can play worse. They can have unexpected developmental curves. Like look at like even someone like Kyle Lowry. That guy was, it took him so long. Jimmy Butler was a late bloomer, right?
Yeah.
Like you can compare any player, any wing player you want, like under 25 to what did Jimmy Butler do at that age? And you have a Hall of Fame talent guy, right?
Yeah.
Like you never know when it's going to click. And honestly, you don't know if it's going to last either. But at the end of the day, like you have to applaud someone for finding their groove. And it sucks. I think the philosophy of let RJ beat us was smart when you're trying to take away other Knicks options. Like going into game 5, Knicks hadn't scored more than 102 in any game in this series. Like, people pointing out the defense, the Cavs D rating in the series was better than it was for the regular season. That's not what lost them. I don't know why the focus has been on the defense. It was on defensive rebounding. It was on the offense that was performing horribly. But even going into game 5, I haven't looked at the number since, but I know the Knicks had the worst half-court offense in the playoffs.
They finished, as far as offensive rating goes, they finished 13th out of 16th through the 5 games. They also are dead last in 3-point shooting. Yeah. So that's I think the craziest part to Knicks fans like us to pay attention to numbers like that is like they won this series without shooting particularly well over the 5 games.
I'm going to feel great if the Knicks are averaging 125 a game against Miami.
Against a worse defense. Yeah, because that's the thing that we took away from. Like, look, after game 2, we were wondering, is Carter right? Like, is the Cavs figured out something on offense, and now this series is going to play out a certain way. And then, the next 3 games happened, and obviously things changed. But I'm curious how they how they do against a Miami Heat team that will have, I don't think, as good a defense as what the Cavs will. But we'll see what this Heat team is. I have some rapid fire questions for you, and some of them are coaching related. And what I get from your pod that you don't like to question coaching too much, but they are. I can't help but notice. I just can't help but notice how well Tibbs coached compared to the bigger staff. And some of the questions I have were like, well, why is he doing that? And I'll start with the Okoro benching, which I understood it in game 2. It was to kickstart the offense. The Knicks' plan of leave Okoro open was working, and it's how the Knicks won game 1. To him then leaving the starting lineup in game 3 altogether. And it felt like Tibbs was like, okay, yes, take away your best option for shutting down Jalen Brunson over the course of the series. And that allowed JB kind of get going over the next 2. And he struggled in the second half of game 5, largely because Okoro was on the court for most of the second half for game 5. So how are Cavs fans feeling about that specific decision when it relates to the Bickerstaff and the job he did this series?
Yeah, I would have stuck with Okoro. Obviously, it's tough. Okoro was coming off of, missing the last 3 weeks of the regular season. And in game 1, he's on the ground multiple times holding his knee in pain, right? So you don't know how much of a factor that is. I didn't mind, even though I would have stuck with Okoro, I didn't mind the decision to go with LeVert, because when you look at it for the season, the Cavs' best 5-man lineup was the core 4 with Caris LeVert. And honestly, LeVert had done a good job on Jalen Brunson in game 2, right? Brunson's still going to hit shots, and I don't think he does as good of a job disrupting Brunson's rhythm. But I think if you look at the game-by-game production for Jalen Brunson throughout the series, you live with that. If the Cavs did what they normally do offensively, and obviously I'm not saying they just missed open shots. I'm not being a Houston Rockets podcaster here, but if they did what they do offensively, the defense they played in this series probably wins you most series, right? I was perfectly fine with it. And even game 3, a lot of Jalen Brunson's buckets came dagger after dagger in that fourth quarter when the game was out of hand, right? I was fine going with that lineup, but my caveat would be, I would have wanted Isaac Okoro to be that 6th man. I want him to be the first sub, whether maybe you're even taking out one of Jared Allen and Evan Mobley at that point, so that Okoro's out there with LeVert, Garland, and Mitchell. So there's a lot of spacing. His off-ball cutting, which I thought he actually did a pretty good job in the minutes he was there. He's able to generate offense better that way. That would have been the decision I'd go with. I don't understand going with Ricky. I don't understand going to Ricky Rubio. I don't think he should have played in this series. We don't know what the health situation is with Dean Wade, but remember, that was one of the things that I highlighted was the single big rebounding numbers were awful. But if you just throw Dean Wade in there, all of a sudden the percentiles jump way up and they're able to do it. So hopefully Dean Wade is able to get healthy over the offseason, because I do think he's someone that helps out in the rotation. But in terms of the way Okoro was deployed, it's just not something I agree with.
The decision to go with Garland on Brunson in game 4. What was your thought there?
I didn't mind it, honestly.
You didn't mind it? Okay.
And we said it before the series. Remember, we were saying that too often they break their defense trying to hide Garland more than they need to. And that outside of Okoro, I wouldn't mind Darius on him. And you look at that, I honestly thought like Darius caused a couple turnovers there. I thought he contested the shots well, and Jalen Brunson just showed better shot making. And yeah, you probably want length on him, but it's not like it was Brunson versus Mitchell in Utah, where it was kind of, you're not even needing to do a move. I'm just giving you an empty lane. Like I thought Garland's defense, I actually like your thoughts on this. I thought Garland's individual defense was pretty solid throughout this series.
I thought when, I got to be honest, I never had a moment where I wasn't comfortable with JB having the matchup with Garland, you know?
No, yeah, I'm not saying, this is like Marcus Smart, Drew Holiday. I'm just saying, like,
right.
It wasn't like food, like Jetty Osman down the stretch in game one.
That is for sure. Because it was the mismatch I was hoping for, it was just like plus the guard-to-guard screens the Knicks were doing. If it wasn't Garland, it was going to end up being Mitchell. I was fine with it because as it was kind of what the Knicks were hoping for. It's like we end up with one of these guards on him, and then like what JB struggles with is length, or Isaac Okoro in this series' case. So it was very much for me, anytime they're not bringing Okoro over in a screen, or when they have Allen coming over to blitz or Mobley coming over to blitz on the pick and rolls, I was okay. Like any of these guards, I'm okay with. Even if like there were moments when Garland was effective, it was never, in my perspective, something that it was more just like, Brunson didn't get the first step quickly enough, or didn't make the shot that he normally makes, you know?
And what you're hoping for there is holding your own in that individual matchup. And, you know, if he scores, he scores, but don't break the rest of your defense. And I think where the mistake ended up coming from was really blitzing with the bigs as well in those spots, because so often they were out of rebounding position. And I think it compromised the defense in that way, because like Jarrett Allen's not a bad rebounder. Like Mitchell Robinson is obviously phenomenal when it comes to offensive rebounding, but a lot of it was when you go back and look at the tape, it's okay, he's in bad position because he's helping and he's doing his responsibilities defensively, but that help in terms of rebounding isn't there. Evan Mobley's not able to provide it. And frankly, like, again, to lean on past playoff performances, it reminds me of Tristan Thompson, who's a phenomenal elite rebounder, getting out rebounded by Steph Curry because he spends so much of the time on the perimeter, trying to blitz, trying to provide that perimeter defense, and taking himself out of rebounding position.
And this is where Julius remaining on the floor, I thought was actually important, because I don't want to call him a decoy, but it was very much like, okay, take Mobley over there. And
he still has a presence, right?
Right. Like his gravity was still necessary to the point. And look, I loved the minutes that Obi gave, specifically in the third quarter of game 5 after Julius went down.
I didn't care for them.
Well, okay. Personally, I loved it, obviously. But the point being, like, he was still able to be impactful, even though he doesn't really command as much gravity in the half court. His gravity really shows up more in transition. Point being, I was okay with Julius missing all these threes. And this is why RJ's performance in the last 3 games is so important, because it gave them another option when those double teams and those very the pressures higher up toward half court that the Cavs would do with JB were so necessary, because they needed a second guy when those double teams came to actually put some pressure on the defense. You're right, though, that I thought the Cavs defended well, which is why I don't want to say, again, I don't want to keep questioning Bickerstaff, but that fourth quarter, the Knicks made 4 shots, and it was very much like, I'm sorry to give you so much agony here, but like, I thought that there was like a path toward them getting back in it. They cut it down to 6 in game 5.
I don't think,
and it just never happened.
I don't think the defense is why they lost. Like I that's a very, like, anytime someone's bringing that up, to me, it's unconvincing. That's not where they lost. They lost on the offensive end. And I do think some of the decisions, like I think some of kind of the schematic when it comes to like blitzing and stuff like that put the Knicks in an advantageous position. And like, these are all mistakes, like whether it comes to the rotation or some of the schematic stuff, like this is all very fixable in my mind, like in terms of growth that you want to see from the coaching staff. So it's not something that I'm like push and panic on, but what I'm hoping for is that after the offseason, there's a little bit more depth. Obviously, They're going to have the mid-level exception to use. They have a ton of second-round picks that they can use, and we saw that you can bring in a rotation guy like that. Whether they bring back Danny Green, and hope that a year removed from the ACL, that he's going to look better. Chris Fedor mentioned that they want to see Ricky Rubio play for the Spanish national team to help get his in shape and get his conditioning up. What does another year of Isaac Okoro look like, right? Like, it's easy to forget he is the same age as Evan Mobley, even though he's been in the league a year longer, right? I'm still a big believer in Okoro, and if Dean Wade can get healthy, right? Like, so if you're bringing in two more wings and you get internal growth from everybody else, you can feel a little bit better about it.
Man, I tell you, Fred Katz is going to love the praise that Dean Wade is getting in this podcast.
Hey man, I am someone that respects Dean Wade.
Fred Katz had him over RJ Barrett in his rankings before the series.
Now, if you're talking takes, that didn't work out. And I love Fred.
Fred has been raked over the coals for that take. Don't worry. But,
give him my love.
Yeah, friend of the pod, Fred Katz. Yeah. On the pod the other day, and we changed his name to Fred Dean Katz Wade, which is Dean Wade Katz. Although I think Dean Katz Wade might actually sound like a better law firm. Point being, I walk away from this series not like the Knicks did win the series in 5. Like, they did largely dominate the way that they wanted to dominate, but I see the path for this is the scar tissue series. This is the series that the Cavs go. They learn what this younger team learns what being in a playoff series is like. It's the unquantifiable things that I kept going back to as like John was writing these newsletters of like, okay, look at all of these 4-man lineups that are doing well for the Cavs. Look at all of these positive,
like all of their top,
all these positive process numbers. And it's like, okay, the Cavs are doing a lot of stuff right. So they're going to win game 4. Oh, so they're going to win game 5. And I leave this with all these things of like, okay, this is their first try. Like, you need to learn how to fail a lot in the playoffs. You know this from the Cavs failures before. Well, with LeBron even before the first the decision. But point being, I'm looking forward in the future that these two teams end up matching up again. As you said, the Knicks aren't going away, and I don't think the Cavs are going away either.
We'll see in the second round next year. 2-3 matchup. I feel good about it.
I'm okay with it. Whatever gets the Miami Heat out of my life forever, I'm okay with.
Hey, you beat them down. I've already identified Max Strus as one of my favorite mid-level exception targets.
Okay.
So if we can bond over, getting beat by the Knicks and wanting to team up and go get them, just like LeBron joining the Heat to beat Boston. So let's do it that way.
I gotta ask: is there still animosity for LeBron leaving to go to the Heat that would sway you to root for the Knicks in this series? I mean, obviously RJ, and then wanting to have the team carryover.
No,
that's not there anymore. Okay,
no, and honestly, I like a lot of the. It's very similar to the Knicks, where I like a lot of the people that cover the Heat. Now, you guys are going to get into some fights.
Oh, we're already there. Giancarlo Navas from the Miami Heat beat. Doing a live stream with him tomorrow, so
I love that man. Please,
he's outstanding.
Please bust his balls, but they are.
I intend to, yeah.
They are unhinged.
Oh yeah,
they are far more unhinged than we are. So you're going to be experiencing that.
I know you can laugh about this. So I had, while I was editing a 7-part podcast in the middle of the night last night, I had shout out to Knicks fans who made us stay on for 5 hours, but I had your show and I had the Miami Heat post game on 2 separate screens, or I guess like split screen on my second monitor here. And every time I get the chance, I go like 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, because I was trying to multitask. So when I finally was done, I could finish. And the contrast in you and Mac talking about the Cavs series, and it was a podcast. It was a conversation. I enjoyed it. I was like, okay, this is them really rationally talking through their emotions, and it was good. And then Giancarlo's got a bottle of Henny while he's talking about, as like he's peeking into his mic, and they're saying how much they're gonna fuck the Knicks up, and it's like, oh, this is going to go down a different path in this series, and I'm curious to see how this goes.
It's wild stuff, and Like even like Kevin Love played well the last 2 games. Like that's a guy.
I was wondering your thought
poorly.
there.
He played so poorly for the Heat. He couldn't stay on the floor in the play-in series. They had to bench him in both of those games, and then just out of nowhere, he's hitting his shots. And again, it's one of those things. Like I don't know how much they're going to be able to play Kevin Love against the Knicks. I don't see that being a helpful matchup. I know Cavs needed spacing and they needed rebounding, but you look at those regular season matchups and what the Knicks did to Kevin Love. I just don't know if he's going to be able to stay on the court. But yeah, like it hurts. And there was reporting out there that they did look to shop him, and there was nothing that wouldn't have, cost a lot of money moving forward. And you lose your mid-level exception and you lose flexibility and stuff like that. Things that we're now like really holding on to. And honestly, like I feel almost a little bit better about the deadline, because as much as I really wanted the Cavs to go out and make a move at the deadline and was disappointed that it didn't come to fruition, the shortcomings were so clearly the 4 guys that you're building around and you're bringing back into next year that it almost makes me feel better that it's okay. Well, how much is Tim Hardaway Jr. going to swing this series, right? Like, or Sadiq Bey, who's just getting targeted every time on the floor, or like, they weren't a player like that away from beating this specific Knicks team. Maybe it helps in a different matchup where, hey, you just need a little bit of shooting. They're not as physical. They're letting the Cavs get into what they want to do offensively. Maybe you don't feel it there, but it's just, it's something where those 4 guys are really going to need to reflect. And honestly, like I'm still holding out hope that Isaac Okoro is going to remain part of that. I think there's real potential for him, and I think he's shown a lot of growth. And honestly, he was one of the only guys that showed like kind of consistent toughness and ready for the moment. Like he was taking the right shots. It's not like he was ever passing anything up.
Yeah, I'm staring at the rotation now. Other than Danny Green, everybody else, LeVert's the oldest at 28. So yeah. I guess technically Rubio's one of the oldest at 32. Yeah. I'm counting the ones that should have been playing in this series, but yeah, I mean this in all sincerity. Like I think the future is bright for Cleveland. For any Cavs fans that are watching here that are disappointed by losing in 5 to the Knicks, it's the thing I said before the series. This is just a different Knicks team since December 4th. It's a very different Knicks team since the trade deadline, and they just rode that momentum. And I'm also curious to see what Cleveland does with this kind of learning experience under their belt. Last thing before I let you go, I usually end with, what do you think of the Knicks? I'm pretty sure we got what you think of the Knicks at this point. Oh, he's got his phone fingered, folks. That's what he thinks of the Knicks. Give me your best breakdown or prediction for the Knicks Heat series. If you think the Heat are going to win this series, go right ahead and say it. But what do I have to look forward to, and what do you see happening?
Here's the thing. I was worried about playing the Knicks. I was more worried about playing the Heat just because I think Eric Spoelstra is the best coach in the league, and playoff Jimmy is a nightmare. I just think they're a little too small. And I think you might outbig the Heat again in this series, because Bam Adebayo's 6'9", and they don't have a lot of other bigs. I don't know if they're going to be able to keep Kevin Love on the floor. I don't know if they're going to be able to keep Cody Zeller on the floor. Josh Hart, obviously that individual matchup with Jimmy Butler is going to be like essential. But especially with Tyler Hero out, like I just don't see where the supplemental playmaking comes. Like I think the Knicks defense did take another step forward after Mitchell Robinson came back from his injury, after Josh Hart joined the lineup, after Emmanuel quickly had his emergence, right? Like they did things that made the Cavs offense like really kind of grind to a halt. And this is a Heat team that I know playoff Jimmy's a different animal, and I know they're a better team in the playoffs, but they still had a negative net rating for the regular season. Like I'm picking Knicks in 6 here. Again, it's one of those series where I could see either team winning. I could see it being shorter. Like this Cavs-Knicks series could have been a bit longer if Josh Hart misses his shot in game 1, right? Like sometimes that's what it comes down to in playoff series. Like Heat Bucks, if Jimmy doesn't have that putback, like that series is going longer, right? Like the margins are going to be small, and I think it's going to be small in the series. But I feel pretty good about the Knicks' chances of advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals. And boy. But if that's the way this goes, where you're playing more likely Boston, but Boston or Philly, Cavs fans are going to seem like just the most pleasant folks after Miami, Boston, or Philly.
I can imagine. I will say, as far as matchups go, and look, this is just how I'm processing all of this. Like, I went into this season with like, just don't be embarrassing. Last year sucked. Just don't be embarrassing. And I predicted 45 wins. That was my most optimistic prediction because I was like, they won 37. They got Jalen Brunson. I'm high on him. He's got to be worth 8 wins. Just be the 7 seed. I'll be okay. They're the 5 seed. All the good things happen. The Josh Hart trade, the pivot, the Randall Renaissance, Quickly's 6th Man of the Year candidacy, whatever the voting says.
He was deserving.
I believe, I thought after watching Evan Mobley for a couple games, I was also thought he was deserving. It was so much as just win a playoff series and I'll be okay. And then it will be an honor to lose to the Bucks on their way to a championship. The thought that like you're now playing the Heat, you're the better team with home court. And then what's waiting for you if you win and you take care of business is a Boston team that you beat 3 out of 4. And I'm going to say it, you have the coaching advantage in that series.
I like that. I like that. Here's the funny thing. You triggered something that I was thinking about because people are like, oh, this is proof that the regular season doesn't matter. Well, the regular season actually did kind of show that
really
the Knicks
did. Knicks ended up winning 7-9 against the Cavs. Ends up being like true to form,
Yeah. So I think people are just so lazy with their narratives that they don't even fully think it through. Like, yeah, there were issues that were identified within this series, and just like in the regular season, like when the Cavs have their 4 guys on the court, it's a positive net rating, even in that series. Was true even in a 5-game loss, although game 5 did make it a little more almost break even. I think it's only +1. But yeah, like all those things we saw in the regular season ended up coming to fruition in the playoffs. And Knicks absolutely deserve this win. So full credit to them.
Thank you. And I said it during our live stream in the middle. I forget which hour it was, but I did say it at some point. The cool thing about the pregame pod that we launched this year and getting to meet some cool people that cover their teams throughout this industry is that I found this. Well, I knew about the Chase Down. I listened to you guys a few times for specific like games and episodes in the past, but like getting to actually like deep dive and look at the Cavs and hear another like smart version of basketball talk in another city. It was really cool. And I sincerely mean this, that like the Cavs have a good one in the Chase Down and the coverage that you and Carter provide. Carter will be hearing from me in that Cavs in 5 prediction. Don't worry.
Remember how outraged I was with his confidence, the way that he was jinxing? Like even after game 2, I was disgusted with all of it. I remain disgusted. I will be podcasting with him a week from now. We're switching to our once a week format here. That guy went on a work trip and stuck me with post-game podcast after a season loss. Are you kidding me, Carter? No, but I love him, man. Yeah, give him hell. I mean, I
plan to. Yes, he may have to pivot to a He may have to pivot to a geopolitical podcast at this point. If you know, you know. Justin, thank you so much for coming on. You're a good sport, and thank you for your kind words about the Knicks. And I look forward to potentially more matchups in the playoffs.
Dude, I hope so, man.
Cavs play each other. You know,
I echo everything you said. I think you guys do a terrific job, and I'm hopeful that this is a first of many, and we'll get lots of chapters, and we'll find reasons to hate one another, and we can have a little bit of fun along the way.
So, last time before we see you next season, can you tell everybody where they could find you on the Chase Down?
Absolutely. So you can find the Chase Down wherever you got this podcast. You can find us on YouTube on the Cavs YouTube channel. You can find me on Twitter at Cavs Canada. Just slap the Cavs in Canada. I apologize for everything else you find after that.
Justin, thank you so much, my man.
Have a good one.